The shadows that live in the walls. The pig family gathers in the living room. Peppa and George are playing, Mummy Pig is preparing dinner, and Daddy Pig is watching TV. Everything seems normal, but by evening Peppa begins to notice that the shadows on the walls are starting to move strangely. At first, it seems like a play of light, but soon the shadows start to take on bizarre shapes. As night falls, the shadows begin to behave more unusually. Peppa and George notice that the shadows on the walls move independently of them. Sometimes they get longer or shorter, but the most unsettling part is that they begin to change, as though something or someone is watching them. Peppa feels uneasy and tries to draw her parents' attention, but they reassure her that it's just reflections. However, when one of the shadows starts mimicking George's movements and then begins to shrink the space in the room, the parents realize that something is wrong. Later that night, Peppa wakes up with the strange feeling that someone invisible is surrounding her. The shadows on the walls become sharper and start to form faces, familiar yet distorted. One of the figures starts moving toward her, stretching out its hands as if it wants to break free from the wall. In a panic, Peppa calls out for her parents, but the shadows continue to move rapidly, filling every room. The walls start closing in, and the house grows darker and more menacing. Peppa realizes that these shadows are not just images, but the souls of those who once lived in this house and are now trapped in this space. The shadows are trying to capture the living to fill the voids left behind by their disappearance. Mummy and Daddy Pig try to find an escape, but the doors and windows are sealed shut. Panic sets in as the shadows begin to close in on the rooms, slowly swallowing everything around them. In the final moment, when it seems like the family might escape, Peppa realizes they cannot. The shadows grow more aggressive, and the family disappears from reality, becoming part of the walls. In their absence, distorted silhouettes of their faces remain on the walls. The house is once again empty, and the shadows watch those who might dare to enter.
Peppa Pig. Something is wrong with Peppa. One rainy morning, Peppa woke up earlier than usual. Her room seemed normal, but something felt off. She looked in the mirror and noticed her reflection appeared strange, slightly distorted. Maybe it's just my imagination, she thought, and went down for breakfast. Throughout the day, Peppa noticed her friends acting differently. Susie, usually cheerful, kept her distance and barely spoke to her. During playtime, Susie finally said, "You look strange today." Peppa frowned but didn't reply. Later, while playing in the yard, she caught her reflection in a puddle. Her eyes seemed darker, and her smile was unnervingly wide, almost creepy. She blinked and the reflection looked normal again. By evening, her family started noticing changes in her behavior. Peppa was unusually quiet, no longer laughing, and her occasional smiles seemed unsettling. "Are you feeling okay, dear?" Mummy Pig asked at dinner. "Yes, Mummy," Peppa replied, but her voice sounded lower and stranger than usual. Late that night, George woke up to strange whispers coming from Peppa's room. He tiptoed to her door and peeked inside. She was standing in front of her mirror, whispering something, but her reflection wasn't moving in sync. It seemed alive, moving on its own. "Peppa?" George asked, his voice trembling. She slowly turned toward him, and for a brief moment, her eyes glowed red. "Go back to bed, George," she said in a voice that wasn't hers. The next day, things got even worse. Peppa became aggressive, breaking George's toys and ripping books. She seemed to enjoy it, laughing in a hoarse, chilling tone that made Mummy and Daddy Pig exchange worried glances. Later that night, loud noises came from Peppa's room. Her parents rushed upstairs to find her standing by the window. She didn't move, but her shadow on the wall writhed and twisted as if it had a life of its own. "Peppa, what are you doing?" Mummy Pig asked, her voice shaking. "I'm not Peppa," she said, turning slowly. Her eyes were completely black, and her smile was unnaturally wide. The next morning, the house was empty. No one knew what had happened to Mummy, Daddy, or George. The camera slowly panned to the kitchen, where Peppa sat alone at the table. She smiled, her eyes still dark and empty.